Hi everyone, welcome back to BRR Knowledge Center. In this today's session, we'll talk about little bit more or the differentiations between API versus web service. So basically, in the market trend nowadays, people are no frequently creating APIs and web services. So what are all these APIs and web services, and what are the differences between these two, and how can we say API is in a web service, or what are all the characteristics of API and the web service? So let's quickly get into the editor here, which I got already having it. So API is nothing but an application programming interface. It is a set of routines, data structures, object classes, and or protocols provided by libraries and our operating system services in order to support the building of applications. So normally this API talks about the kind of interface. So I think that this would be better. Can we change this to API versus web service? Okay. So it's an application programming interface. It contains some set of routines and data structures, and also it supports some protocols by libraries and operating systems to support the building of applications like HTTP or HTTPS kind of stuff, or set of routines is nothing but kind of a structure of root and endpoints and HTTP webs and kind of data structures you have to use it, like decorating of all this stuff on top of your endpoint or the service method. All this stuff it is supporting in the API, which basically using it for interacting your application program. So again, if you talk about application program, it's nothing but kind of job which is going to be performed or execute to do some task. So exactly, if you define API, methods for one software program into other software program. So an API exactly defines the method for one software program to interact with other program. That way, it is going to get the information from other APIs into your source API or source program. And API generally involves calling functions from within a software program. That's how it is beginning. Beginning as being a user, you are not bothered about program inside of API, and it look at the function how it is working and how to use it, and it is going to invoke it. When you talk about web service, a web service is defined by the W3C as a World Wide Web Consortium standard organization, which basically means for standards like for the HTML and CSS. So this organization has been defined this as a software system designed to support interoperable machine-to-machine interaction over a network. So if you look at the API, it is the interface for the program, application program. When it comes to web service, it's interoperable machine-to-machine interaction. So if you wanted to interact between two different machines on our over the network, so we must go with web service, or even if you go with an API, it become a web service because you are using over the network between two machines to interact and exchange the data. That becomes a web service. So that's what the rule and the standard defined by W3C. So basically, it defines for a design to support interoperable, interaction between machine to machine interaction over a network, right? So API and web services serves as means of communication basically. So if you use API or web service, either of these two, basically using it for communication between the programs or between the machines, whatever it is, whatever it may be. But only the concern was only the thing was in this two features or components was a communication. That's what serving the two concepts as means of communication. So basically, web service facilitates interaction between two machines over a network. That's what it is defining. That's what it is defining by W3C. And API acts as an interface between two different applications so that they can communicate with each other. That's what the main basic difference between this API and the web service. So if you look about introduction, so if we can talk about a little bit more on introduction stuff about web service and this API. So we have some couple of points to discuss here. First point was, as I mentioned, an API exactly uh, exactly defines uh, methods for one software program to interact with the other, right? So an API generally involves calling functions or methods, right, from within a software program. That's what the basic nature of API, right? API exactly defining the method for one software program to interact with other program, and generally involving calling a function from within a software program. Got it? So when it comes to like kind of a web service, so we'll talk about more on that. So being a user, you are not worrying about what is there inside of program, right? So being a user, being a developer, I'm not bothering about program inside of my API. I only bother or look at the function logic or function syntax, that how to use and how to invoke, right? So when the action involves sending data over a network, so web services come into the picture. Okay, that means when uh, same action, or when this action kind of not sending a data, when the action involves so sending data or a network, right? So web services comes into the picture, right? So in case of web application, so the API used is web-based, right? The API used is web-based, right? In case of desktop application, in case of um, desktop applications or standalone applications, right? The kind of APIs, or the service can be called as an API because it doesn't require a network, or it is not going to send any data between two machines here in the desktop applications, because you self-defining as in a standalone, right? So such as, if no applications such as kind of a spreadsheet, this is a kind of API which you are using in Microsoft Excel sheets kind of stuff, and Word document, so etc., right? So these basically use no VBA and COM based APIs, right? A VBA and COM based APIs which don't require or which don't involve internet. That is web server or web service. Got it? So what I'm trying to explain about this introduction part was an API exactly defining the method for one software program to interact with other program, or you can say other software program for more clarity. And also it involves calling a function from within a software program as well. So basically two purposes we use this API. So when any action involves sending a data between kind of programs or missions over a network, or when action involves sending a data which requires internet connection, then web services comes into the picture. That means you are sending over the internet between two web servers or two machines. Got. So in case of web applications, it might be in .NET, it might be in Java, it might be in Python, it might be in React, it might be in any different language. If it is a web application, then API used as web-based. API used is web-based, right? Web-based API, you have to use it. In case of desktop applications, such as spreadsheets on Word documents kind of stuff, so we basically use uh, we use we can say basically we use VBA and COM based APIs which don't involve internet, that is web service, right? So only web applications are using APIs based web based APIs. Okay. So when it comes to a web service, so a web service merely an API wrapped in HTTP. So an API does not always need to be web-based, right? It might be non-web-based also. That's what I'm talking about, standalone applications. So a web service is merely an API wrapped into HTTP. So whatever web service you're going to use it, an API that might be wrapping into HTTP request. So an API does not always need to be web-based. So it might be a standalone a desktop. So kind of VBA or COM components, right? So an API consists of complete set of rules and specifications for a software program to follow in order to facilitate interactions. So that's anyway that standard rule. So an API consists of a set of rules and specifications for a software program to allow in order to facilitate interaction. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is any API, we must have some rules and regulations and guidelines, specifications, so that you have some idea on how to use and how to invoke your API, and it is facilitating interaction steps to do that integration bit. So the APIs can be exposed in a number of ways, which include a COM object or DLL or some .h files in C program languages, or jar files or RMA files in Java, XML over HTTP, JSON over HTTP, etc. etc. So API can have multiple forms. That's what I'm trying to say. So the APIs can be exposed in a number of ways, right? I'll say like kind of thing was number of ways which include object or DLL or .h files in C++ programs. That means header files, right? And also jar files, Java jar files, or RMI for Java, right? And XML or HTTP or JSON or HTTP. There are different ways the API can be included or API can be exposed. Okay, COM object and DLL and .h files and jar files or XML or HTTP or JSON. So these are the different kind of forms, multiple forms of API now program. So where you can have that relevant API inside of the form, so that can be used based on the application. So COM object, basically we use it for desktop, and DLL also we use it for desktop and web, and .h files, C++ programs, jar files, RMI or Java. That's what I'm saying. XML or JSON or anything. So we use it as part of web. Okay. So the main differences between these two uh, can be listed here. So all web services are APIs. No doubt about it. But all APIs are not web services, right? So whatever web services you are using as part of now sharing or sending a data between two machines or network, all are becomes APIs. So you can say that all web APIs, all web services are APIs, but all APIs are not web services, because as I mentioned, my this kind of stuff is not going to be transferred over the network, right? Then we cannot say it's a web service, right? These are standalone application supportable formats, right? So that's why all web services are APIs, but all APIs are not web services. And second thing was web services so might not perform all the operations that an API would perform, that an API would perform. So whatever web services we are going to create it might not perform all operations that an API would perform. So absolutely true, because we are building web services based on the internet or the network is supporting it, right? So we have to consider all the aspects, security and performance, because you are relying on the internet, and we have to face a lot of security, cyber security challenges and other performance challenges. So we should think of all these aspects and build up service. Hence, might not perform all the operations that an API will perform, because API might be desktop or web based. So I can use that API in two areas. So if it is using it in desktop, I don't, or I'm not bothering about the cyber security or performance or network security or applications being deployed on different machines. Okay. And third one is a web service uh, uses only three styles of use. Three styles like SOAP and REST and XML, right? Using RPC. Okay, for communication. So web service uses only three styles. SOAP, REST, XML for communication. Whereas API may use any style for communication, right? So web service only supporting three styles: SOAP, REST, XML, RPC. When it comes to API, so we may use any style like XML, HTML, or JSON, or plain text. So there are a lot of content types. It is we have an API, so we can use any styling here. So there is no restriction as part of API as like web service. And coming to the next one, so a web service always need a network for its operations, whereas an API does not need a network. This is what the major difference between API and web service. So Web service always, deploying on network, so that then only it has an uh, provision to interact remote machines to send the data or share the data. But when it comes to API, there is no need of having an internet or network. So I can simply deploy in my local machine, then it is going to talk to my local applications without internet or network. Okay. So last but not least, web services are simple interface using HTTP protocol. Web services are a simple interface using or HTTP protocol. Okay, and web services can be no. I think what I'm trying to say is web services can be deployed as like deploying in different way as compared to API. So API basically not required internet as mentioned in the above. So only the web service is required network. Hence, I think this bit we can separate it here. The web services can be deployed, and the above options are the major differences between API and web services. And the major difference, if we can observe between these two, was only the deployment and the action, how you are doing it. So, and other than that, there is no major difference. When API, you are trying to use it as part of sending data between the two machines or network, then it again becomes web service. That's what main first point we discussed. All web services are APIs, but all APIs are not web services. So I can create APIs in different format, in different ways. So coming to the web services can be, one is, so we are going to developed by, so yeah, web services can be developed by a developer, right? So that's what I'm trying to say here. Web services can be developed by a developer who is going to work in company, right? So I can say developed by one company and used by another company and hosted by third party, right? So this is what the nature of web service basically. So developed by one company and used by another company and hosted by third party person. That's what the nature of this. So what is the name in web services? Why this web? What's the name? Uh, uh, Web services, right? So web means, I think you know that this is HTTP protocol, right? And services means request and response. Request and response. So web services is a stateless protocol. We need a request and we receive a response and we are finishing it. So finally, when you say web services, right, is a stateless protocol because you're using HTTP. So we send a request and then we receive a response and finally we finished. So that's what web service. So the name web services means web is nothing but a HTTP protocol, because if you want to browse anything which relates to web, you must use any so HTTP protocol on the browser. Services means kind of request and response, right? So you need to send a request and you need to receive a response back. Overall, web service is a stateless protocol. We send a request, we receive a response, and finally we finished. That's what the nature of stateless protocol. So these are all details. So I can explain you now. Share it here as part of API and web service. So the definition wise, both are same, but the design framework is different. API is simply a kind of routine which is developing within a program or in different program being used to share data between two programs in the same mission or different missions. When it comes to web service, purely it is designed for interoperable between two missions or a network. Okay. So all APIs, all web services are APIs, but all APIs are not web services. That's what the main intention of this API and web service difference. So I hope you understand the difference between API and web services and the introduction part of this two. Thanks for listening this video. Please subscribe this channel for more videos. Thank you.